We're rolling.
Welcome to the REI Rookies Podcast.
The Real Estate Investing Rookies Podcast, episode number 68, where we invite you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Josh Koth.
And I'm Jack Haas.
And here at REI Rookies, we believe in a couple key principles. Number one, the best way to retain information is by teaching it to others. And number two, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not competitors, we're a community. So let's get into some real estate investing.
This week, we're going to start by talking about why real estate investing and revisit some topics to refresh not only our audience memory, but our own.
Yeah, we say this all the time, but it's so important to keep your mindset bucket full and keep air in the balloon and whatever other silly metaphors you can come up with. But you have to replenish that drive all the time, because in this industry, you're constantly getting told no, right? It's rejection 99% of the time. So in order to keep your spirits up and keep the drive and the motivation level high, I think you have to kind of refuel at times and take a step back and remember why we're doing this and what the end goal is. So we like to do that with the podcast as well, kind of refocus and once in a while touch base on why we're even in real estate.
Yeah, so we've been doing some talks recently, and it's kind of pointed us back to a PowerPoint deck that we keep refreshing. So we're going to be talking from that, and we'll probably make majority of these bullet point items in our show notes.
That's right. So it all started for me with a date, September 9th, 2015. And if you go back to our first two episodes, you can kind of hear our story in more detail as far as how we got pointed towards real estate. But for me, that was the date that my whole team at work got laid off, and the alleged safety of the corporate environment was no longer accessible to me. So I had to make a choice. I was at a crossroads. Do I continue on and pursue another IT job, or actually accept a job that was being offered from another company, or do I become self-employed and pursue real estate investing, which wasn't even my first choice. I just knew I wanted to be self-employed, and we'll talk about how I was led to real estate. So it was a real crossroads moment.
And I think we kind of share that date because although I had jumped to another job, about that date is what triggered me to buy my first rental as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you saw our whole team get let go, so that was a little bit of a red flag for you. Being at the same company thinking, maybe my time is limited as well. I better think of some other options here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Those corporate jobs, they give you a strong, false sense of security.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So basically then I was self-employed, right? And I, as a photographer, I had a studio, still do, but I realized real quickly that I'd kind of jumped from the frying pan into the fire. And even though I was technically my own boss, I thought I was an entrepreneur, but really I'm not. I just had a job that wasn't as good, right? Because there's no sick time, there's no vacation pay, there's none of that. The benefits that come along with having a corporate job, you're just having to work, trade your time for money. And after I read The Cash Flow Quadrant, which followed up Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, then I realized, I was still on the wrong side of the quadrant. I was still basically an employee, but I was self-employed, which was technically better as far as freedom goes, but not as far as escaping the rat race or building real passive income or wealth. So I knew I had to do something to get over to the other side of the quadrant, which is business owner or investor. So that's what pointed me towards real estate in general, well, actually towards passive income. And real estate was revealed as the best way to generate that the average person has a shot at actually doing and accomplishing. I knew I wasn't going to invent the next great Shark Tank idea. I didn't have any hit songs in my brain that were going to pay me royalties for the next 50 years like Paul McCartney. So I had to kind of take the path well-traveled by other people that had accumulated wealth. And all signs pointed to real estate. And we'll kind of get into some reasoning why here. And I'm going to throw out a number. And all you out there in audio land can guess what this signifies. $104,000.
That's how much you made on your last iPhone fart app.
Wah, wah. That is the average balance of retirement count at retirement age. Now, if that doesn't wake you up and scare you a little bit, I don't know what will. I don't know how anyone expects to live 20 or 30 years on $104,000 after retiring. And
especially knowing that typically a single medical bill will rack up to $104,000.
yeah, you can't even retire at that point, much less live comfortably if that's all you have saved. And I had double that saved at 40, but I still was running the math and realizing I wasn't going to get there. And now I'll throw another number out there, $55,775. Okay, so that is the average U.S. household income. Obviously, your mileage may vary depending on what part of the country you live in, but in the upper Midwest, that's an okay salary for a family, but it's less than I was making. And another number is 1.7 million. Okay, so these two numbers are kind of tied together, the 55,000 and the 1.7 million. The 1.7 million is the amount you'd have to have sitting in a retirement account to spin off the 55,000 every year based on traditional returns in paper investments and retirement accounts. So I knew a few things when I saw those numbers. I knew, number one, I didn't want to live on $55,000 because that was a significant lifestyle reduction for a family. And number two, I was never going to get to the 1.7 million based on the rate of accumulation in my savings that I was currently at. So,
and the average, that 104,000, isn't even 10% of what is needed to spin off that average. I mean, it's significantly less.
Right, and I had double that, but I still wasn't going to get to the 1.7 million based on my savings rate. So when you're sitting down with your financial advisor and they start saying things like, well, you don't have to retire at 65, you can work later, work longer, or they say, well, you can take a lifestyle reduction, you can live on, most people don't spend as much money when they retire, or they say, well, you can start saving a lot more money. None of those three sounded very attractive. They all sounded like a sacrifice in some way. So I wasn't willing to accept that. So I really had to change my mindset. And the way you can beat the average returns of people's retirement accounts is by producing a higher ROI, a higher return on your investment, right? And that's how you can outpace the traditional retirement account path. So then I still wasn't even at real estate yet. Then I just knew I needed to generate high ROI, high return. So how do I generate returns that outpace inflation and other retirement options? Well, that's when all my research then pointed to real estate. So it was clear to me that everyone of the top percentile of every wealth manager's portfolio, the people in the top percentile, they were using real estate to either get there or preserve their wealth. And the more I researched, the more it made it clear that real estate was the only path.
Yeah, I think we all hear in the media the wealthy 1%.
Mm-hmm.
That 1%, I'd say 90% of that 1% are made up by real estate investors.
Right. And it's one of the easiest pathways, not easy, but the simplest pathways where the average person can actually produce passive income, because it doesn't require, to come up with your amazing Shark Tank idea or write your hit song. You just have to buy property that produces returns. And if you do your numbers right, you can hit those targets. So once I was pointing towards real estate, now we're going to go into some reasons why real estate can get there, why it can beat the traditional returns that people are seeing in their retirement accounts. But first I want to address some of the downsides or some of the things that you'll hear when you say you're going to invest in real estate. They call it the 3 T's, right? Tenants, termites, toilets. All the negative aspects of owning residential real estate. You're going to get the 2 a.m. call from the tenant who has a plugged toilet. You're going to have to run over there and unplug their toilet at 2 in the morning. Well, first of all, I'm sure that has happened in the past, but it happens way less than you think. It's kind of almost an urban myth. And everything can be dealt with by hiring property management and maintenance, right? You just factor that into your deal. I don't want to get a call at 2 in the morning from any tenant. In fact, I don't want a tenant to even know my number or have the ability to contact me. So you pay a property manager to deal with all those things. So in my mind, that objection is not going to stop me from investing in real estate.
Yeah, and we're going to probably always encourage everybody to, even if you're on the fence and you're gonna get your first property, even if you're not going to use a property manager, make sure that you're running the numbers with a property manager in mind, so that you have those numbers at the ready when you do implement a property manager.
Because even if you manage your first couple yourself, it's not something you're going to want to do once you have 10 or 15 or 20 units, because that's basically another full-time job. And as an investor, your job should be finding the next deal, talking to sellers, negotiating contracts. That's the highest return on your time. And property management is something that you should happily outsource. And believe me, it's not something I want to do either. So it took no convincing for me to outsource that. I did that on my first property.
Yeah, we kind of have a saying. We definitely like the idea of owning rental property. We do not want to manage.
Right, I want to be an investor, not a landlord. That's what I always tell people.
We're trying to stay on that right side of the cash flow quadrant.
Yep, we want to be the business owner, the investor. If you're property managing, you're basically self-employed again on the wrong side of that quadrant. So another objection people have when you mention you're going to invest in real estate is they say, well, what about another market crash? What about a recession? You hear all these stories about people being foreclosed on, everyone losing their houses, investors putting up developments and going into bankruptcy on the entire development. Hear about these stories in Florida, California, places like that. Well, I guess we're a little isolated here in the upper Midwest. Our market never really had a crash, right? I mean, basically the appreciation just kind of flattened out for a couple of years. So we're kind of in a unique, isolated market here, so I don't have to be as concerned about that. And if I was on the coast or in a really highly volatile market, I would definitely keep a closer eye on that. So your mileage may vary again, depending on your market. But what I would say was, unless I'm in the middle of a flip, like literally purchase a property, working on it, haven't sold it yet, and then the market crashes right in the middle, that's about the only time I can see getting hurt, because your ARV is going to drop and you may not be able to recoup your investment. But that alone is not a reason for me to not invest in real estate. Just the off chance that may occur, especially when we're in a market that's fairly slow and steady and doesn't see volatile, wild swings. But even if I was in one of those volatile markets, I still wouldn't let that stop me, because you can't be stopped by the what ifs of the possible negatives, right? You really have to switch your brain to how can I make this work, not why won't it work. And we really think that, and that's one of the reasons why we write offers even if we don't think they'll take it, because we think, well, maybe there's a way this could work. If you talk yourself out of a deal before you even write an offer, that's not a good strategy.
And we actually would see a recession as a buying opportunity.
Right.
So
exactly.
we really have to change the mindset there to see where there can be an opportunity to be had. And actually, what you will typically see when a recession hits, the rental market goes up and the need for rental property increases. So that side of the business is actually going to be better in a recession.
Yeah, unfortunately, if people start losing their houses, they're still going to need a place to live, so they're going to turn to a rental property most likely. So your demand for your rentals could actually increase. So another reason that a recession, as an investor, is kind of, it protects you in a recession if you're a buy and hold investor. And, that's where the real estate and the stock market are similar. You always want to buy low and sell high, right? Well, if prices dip, that's a time that you can scoop up some properties like you mentioned.
Well, and so we already talked about the calculations, and make sure you have the property manager involved. But this is where I think we got interesting when we started out as to dialing in what we actually needed to do and to run our numbers. And everybody throws out some concepts of what those numbers are. You might hear the 60-40 rule, the 1% rule, all these different things. But of course, it's going to vary by your market. And we kind of settled into what our bank was going to require from us.
Yeah, one thing you need to figure out is, in your particular market, what do you need to be purchasing properties at as far as an average below what they're worth, the ARV, the after repair value, or the comps. So if a good deal to you is 70% of ARV, your market's going to determine that. It's going to tell you that. So you need to figure out, and also depending on your strategies, right? If you're buying and holding or flipping, and we'll get into some of these exit strategies in a minute, but depending on what your focus is going to be, you need to figure out what is a profitable deal, right? So, and that will vary by your market. But if you're buying, like for in a flip situation, basically sadly what we found is if you buy it for about half of what the ARV is, you'll probably be profitable. And that's kind of a scary number, right? If somebody's, there's a house that's worth $150,000 when it's fixed up and you're offering $75,000, that's a pretty scary number for a lot of beginning investors to offer, which may be half of also what they're asking too. You just have to figure out where you're going to be profitable and offer that and really stick to it.
And we probably have to make it another podcast episode, but there are some strategies to talk to sellers to help them reset that price anchor and expectations. So more times than not, some of those numbers are going to be unrealistic, and you really have to help them convince themselves on getting to those numbers.
Right. And if they aren't willing or aren't motivated or have any type of financial distress, or the property doesn't have enough physical distress, there may not be enough motivation there to make a deal. And you need to determine that quickly and then move on to the next property, because you're going to get told no 29 times out of 30. So you need to hurry up and get through the 29 no's so you arrive at the one person who is willing to who has a situation where you're actually solving their problem and they're willing to possibly sacrifice some equity for some speed or for some quick cash or whatever the situation is, depending on how you're making your offers. You want to get to that yes as quickly as possible, so speed is of the essence.
Or you want to get to that no as quickly as possible so you can move on.
Right.
So this is something that's kind of interesting, is that when we were doing this early on, I think everybody goes through that anxiety regarding these numbers, and you're throwing out an offer. You're spending the time to go through the property, walk through every single one, dot the I, cross the T, and get second opinions. When you get comfortable with that, you start to realize that it's all about it's a numbers game. Mm-hmm. I mean, what are we finding right now? We have to offer 20 offers, 30 offers to get one accepted. We have to get through the 29 no's to get to the one yes. So it's all about consistent, persistent behavior again.
Exactly. And so you just need to get mentally over that hurdle of, oh, this offer is going to insult them, or they're never going to take this. Don't let that stop you from submitting it anyways, because you never know. You don't negotiate on behalf of the seller against yourself, right? And a lot of people say, well, they're never going to take this offer, so they don't even bother writing it up or pursuing it any further. And that's really a mistake, because we've gotten so many properties where I never thought they would ever take our offer or get anywhere close. And they did. And that's probably, a fourth of the deals that we've found over the last 3 years have come from that type of situation where other people just didn't even bother submitting an offer that was anywhere close to profitable. And we did, and that's the reason that we ended up getting the deal.
Yeah, and we have many examples of that. And one of the most recent ones, just to give you an idea of the drastic price change you can get, is there was a 12-plex not far from here, and we submitted our offer just like the nice robots we are, and we got pretty much $100,000 discount on a single property. I mean, that it's pretty significant when you think about all we did was submit, just like we've been doing for the past 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah, and it was nearly like a 40% discount off the price they were asking. And we literally said, well, they're never going to take this. And then we submitted it anyways. Went through the trouble of sitting with the realtor, writing it up, It took a little bit of time, even though I had 0% chance of thinking it was going to get accepted. And then the next day they accepted it. They didn't even counter offer. So you just never know. So our philosophy is throw out the offer that we know is profitable for us and give them the opportunity to at least consider it. Because if you don't write the offer, they don't even know that you were interested, much less have an opportunity to consider your offer. And an offer in writing has a ton of gravitas. So you always want to, that's another lesson, we've talked about many times in the past, always write up the offer in writing. And if you're using a real estate agent, have them write it up, present it to the listing agent. Don't just do a verbal pass at it.
Yeah. An unwritten offer is a no.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. All right. Well, I think this is probably a good place to stop. We're 20 minutes in. We're about halfway through this topic right now. So in the next episode, we'll finish off kind of recapping why we love real estate as an investment and all the reasons that it is a great investment and some of the numbers, tips, and tricks and strategies we use to maximize that investment.
So if you have any questions for us, and good news, our email is working again, so you can shoot us an email at info@reiRookies.com.
Hit us up on Facebook or Twitter at REI Rookies. And if you have some money sitting on the sidelines you'd love to put to work and get a nice return, go to investwithvpp.com.
And remember, get off the bench
and get into the game. We'll see you next time.